Hello everyone and welcome to another Scots Whay podcast, and the Braidwood boys are back again. We did one of these. Hello Andy.
Hello Ali.
So Andy, for those of you who didn't see our podcast looking at the best or our favourite Scottish albums of the 80s, Andy is my brother up in Braemar, and we did a podcast, as I said, talking about our favourite the Scottish albums we listened to the most in the 80s, and people seem to quite like it, believe it or not. So we thought, well, let's give it another stab with our stuff from the 90s and see if this has got any other legs in it.
Which just seems like yesterday, actually.
Well, I know.
It seems like yesterday.
So let's do a bit of scene setting, because when we were in the 80s, we both were kind of in the same house for the majority of it. But by the time the 90s started, I was living in Glasgow and you were in Aberdeen, is that right?
Yes, I'd gone to Aberdeen. Yeah. So I was studying at Gray's School of Art. So
this will be interesting because we kind of knew, I think, what we would pick for the 80s albums, because, as I said, we were kind of both listening to a lot of them at the same time. But this will be interesting to see the differences, because there'll be stuff I think that we'll both pick that, you know, we won't realise that the other one was listening to, having all that distance between us.
That's right.
So let's kick off, Andy. We should say it's going to be 10 albums, Scottish albums, or Scottish records, I should say. I've got at least one EP there. From the 1990s, and again, it's the ones that we actually listen to rather than, you know, trying to change history in any way. So what's your first pick?
Well, on the last discussion we had, I chose my favourite Big Country record, and in the 90s, Big Country brought out a new record in 93 called the Buffalo Skinners, and I had kind of lost track a wee bit before the days of internet and instant gratification. You kind of lost. Well, I'd lost track, and I think they brought out an album called No Place Like Home, and it had gone a bit. There was a honky tonk piano on it, and there was banjos on it and stuff, and I was, I just that wasn't.
Honky Tonk Women at one point.
They did, yeah, because they played support for the Stones on one of their tours, so there was an influence, and that bled onto a track called oh gosh, you hated it, didn't you, Ali, at the time? It was King of Emotion, but that was on another album on a previous album. Yeah. With the na 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 nee 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 na 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 na
na na
yeah. Well, the drum beat off that was a kind of homage to Honky Tonk Women. Anywho, the Buffalo Skinners came out, and after me kind of thinking, I'm not sure if the honky tonk piano and the banjo and all that is this came out, and it was back to being loud guitars, quite Raleigh a word?
No, I don't think so, but we'll go with that.
It is now, right? Okay. It was pure raw, and it was michty raw. And so it was. I suppose grunge was about and all that, and the loud guitars were back in.
Yeah.
And Stuart used to say that himself when he came on stage. Don't worry, we'll be getting the loud guitars out soon, because they used to be their own support band. Come on, did an acoustic set, then came on with the loud guitars. And Buffalo Skinners is a great return. I thought it was a great return to form, and I can remember as clear as anything sitting in the art school in the studio, and the new single came out, which was a track called Alone, and it just sounded like my Big Country from back in the day, and that's very pleasing at the time. So that's my first album.
Excellent. I don't really know that at all. I can remember some of it, but I kind of, like you said, after the Seer, I think I kind of stopped.
That's right.
A lot of.
Well, there was a kind of holy triumphal of the Crossing, Steeltown, and the Seer. I always think of those as those are the records that I loved.
They're a great opening 3 albums.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to beat those, I think. So, but the later stuff is worth checking out, I think, big time, actually, especially the Buffalo Skinners album.
So my first pick is, I'll put a bit of context in this. In the late 80s, early 90s, I was spending a lot of time in the clubs of Glasgow, like sub club Tunnel, Fury Murray's, you know, various things, but a lot of dance music and indie music. It was a great time for that kind of crossover. Obviously, Screamadelica being perhaps the ultimate example of this, but there was a lot of bands who previously had maybe been in guitar bands and stuff, but then they found a kind of dance music. There was some great crossover stuff. Soup Dragon's been another terrific example of that.
Jesus Jones and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But one album which I loved and didn't do as well as it should have done is One Dove and Morning Dove White. Now, this came out in '93. It's Dot Allison, Ian Carmichael, and Jim McEwen. And I think it was supposed to come out in 1992. And for legal reasons, I don't know whether it was samples or, you know, there's a lot of that stuff about. It didn't come out at the time. And I think that hurt it in terms of how it was received, because music moves very quickly anyway. And I think dance music in particular, you know, if you are right at the kind of zeitgeist 1 minute, 6 months later, you know, people have moved on and are listening to other things. And unfortunately, I think that's what happened with One Dove. This is a brilliant record. Still, White Love is one of my favourite tracks ever. I think it's great. And it's very chilled out. It's that whole kind of after the party's finished kind of vibe about it, you know, washed out. And I think if it came out in '92, we'd be talking a classic like Screamadelica and right up there with it, because I rate it that highly. I think it's such a good album. But unfortunately, that year, I think just took a bit of shine off it. Fallen, the first single, I think came out in '91. So that's a long period for people to be talking about an album. And people were talking about it. They were very excited about it. Dot Allison is a terrific singer and still making great music today. But yeah, it just didn't quite take off as it should. But yeah, fantastic set of songs for me. So
Andy, I missed that one. I know a lot of my pals rave about that album. And
I think this was very big in the Glasgow clubs. Remember at the time, a lot, particularly dance music, there was loads of remixes, like about 7 or 8 remixes every kind of single that came out, and that happened with these. But if you were, this would be regular played in, you know, the more a dance end of the clubs in Glasgow, and great tracks and a great band, and they were all great musicians as well. It's a bit of a lost gem. Or you were saying like pals of yours know it, and I think, you know, people that were around at that time hold it in the esteem that I do, definitely. Okay, number 2 from you.
Well, what I'd meant to do before was also prefix the whole thing by saying I was listening to a lot of experimental music at the time, because that went hand in hand with what I was looking at when I was at the art school. So yeah, a lot of the music that I was listening to relax to is I don't know. What am I trying to say? It took me a while. I was listening to a lot of ambient music and a lot of experimental stuff, and so to get a list of Scottish bands, I had to really scratch my head, because, you know, I was listening to other stuff. Anywho, my next one, it's not. I haven't put these in chronological order, so they go all over the place chronologically. My next one is Songs of Northern Britain. By the Teenage Fan Club. And the thing that sold me that, well, there was 2 things that sold me that. The single, Ain't That Enough. Yeah. When I first heard that, it's everything I like about that form of music. There's the 12-string jangle, which I just love. It just sounded like the most sunshiny, summery day, you know, coming out of the radio again. And for me, that's what I liked about that kind of record. It was also it has all those elements of tambourine and you know, that kind of Birdsian feeling to it, but also the photography on that album. I know you shouldn't judge a record by its sleeve, but the actual photography, I can't remember who did it. It does say somewhere obviously on the. I don't have my CDs with me because they're all at the shop, and I didn't want to get a wheelbarrow out to bring them back up. So the photography on that, of the old disused filling station and all that. And I think actually, I don't know when Travis's album came out, the Man Who, but that had similar imagery, you know, of places up at Aviemore and slightly disused Scottish holiday type photographs, etc.
I think the man who came out about 95, 96. I think
before that. Mm-hmm.
And I think Songs from Northern Britain was a bit after that.
97.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think that's right. I would have to double check that. Maybe I'll do that while you're talking about something else in a bit. But so Teenage Fan Club in general, Andy, I'm going to talk about them as well later on. But were you always a fan, or was this the album that you kind of...
Again, because I was listening to other things at the time, I wasn't listening to a lot of this kind of music. So no, I didn't. To be honest with you, I mean, I knew. Excuse me. I knew some of the work, but this was the album that really I bought the album on the basis of the single, and it all has that summery feel to it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so my second one, mine are in chronological order because I am that.
They would be. Yeah, absolutely.
And it is Dundee's very own Gary Clark. Now, I don't know if you can recognise him from that picture, but Gary Clark, people who were around in the 80s would know as the lead singer of Danny Wilson, Mary's Prayer and Second Summer of Love and all that kind of stuff. And most recently, he then, once Danny Wilson finished, and in the kind of later 90s, went on to work with some incredible people, like writing songs with and for Liz Phair, Kathy Dennis, David McCalmont. I think he worked with Lloyd Cole. And then more recently, he did the music for a brilliant film called Sing Street, which if you haven't seen, I really recommend it. It's brilliant. And also an Amazon television program that's out just now called Modern Love, which is a big American drama, and he's done a lot of the music for that. So he's always been doing well. And he's also done music with Grand Gestures and you know, other local bands. I think he's actually working with a band called Heights, HYTTS, or a terrific new band, and I think he's got a lot to do with them. But this is his solo record, which came out in 1993 as well, and it's called 10 Short Songs About Love. And I just always go back to this record. It's terrific. I know you're a big Boo Hewerdine fan.
I am.
Yeah, it's a kind of similar vibe to that in terms of the songs. I rate him as one of the best songwriters around, still to this day. I just love his songs. This is quite highly produced. There's a lot of stuff as was at the time. You know, think Curiosity Killed the Cat or Johnny Hates Jazz or, you know, that kind of stuff. But the song, it doesn't, for me, it doesn't bother me, and the songs still kind of shine through on it. Gary Clark's just a great singer-songwriter, and if you only know from Mary's Prayer, and if you don't know that, then, you know, for goodness sake, can I go and check it out, because he's a great musician.
Mary's Prayer reminds me so much of going up to college. It must have been that year, and it was on all the time, everywhere. It was, no, maybe not. It was earlier than that, was it?
Well, I think it might have been, but it was still, I mean, it still gets played on the radio now.
Yeah.
So it would have been played a lot. And I always think of Danny Wilson kind of in that group with kind of Hue and Cry and that kind of blue-eyed soul stuff that was really popular in the late 80s and early 90s. But underneath that, there were some fantastic songwriters like Lloyd Cole, and Gary Clark is their equal and up there with him. So number 3, Andy, what have you got for number 3?
I'm just reading them out as they come on my list, and mine is the Mighty KLF and Chill Out. Ah,
brilliant.
Which is a record I just wouldn't ever be without. And it was introduced to me, funnily, I was trying to think where I heard about it, and I was at a Primal Scream concert when they were doing Screamadelica, so this is obviously out already. And I was just standing at the bar, this guy comes up chatting away, and he said, have you heard KLF Chill Out? And I said, no, I hadn't heard of them at all, because it just wasn't on my radar.
Just a random stranger?
Yeah, no, you know what it's like. Right. And so we get chatting, and he's like, I know, man, you should try this. And so off I went and got it, and it was just perfect for me. I think it must have been talking about influences and music and I've been talking about Brian Eno or whatever like that, and this is I always recommend this to everyone. And it's more than just a chill out record, really. I mean, there's just so much on it, and there was bits that you already knew, like Acker Bilk, Stranger on the Shore, and Elvis Presley in the Ghetto. There's wee sections of Albatross by Fleetwood Mac's on there as well, just tiny wee sections of things. I don't know how they get away with it. I mean, they must have. I don't know how they get away with
Pay
that. But,
some people, I guess.
they would have, somebody would have to get paid. And what else is on it? Yeah, there's actually a bit of Van Halen on there as well. You know, Eruption, believe it or not, comes on the radio, and yeah, it's just a perfect record, and it feels like what it's.
Sorry, I'm going to say KLF are a really interesting band, because I think a lot of people remember their kind of Top of the Pops years, you know, Justifying the Ancients and all that stuff, Tammy Wynette and Ice Cream Van and all of that. But loads of different music and styles that they worked on, and the ambient stuff was brilliant. Yeah.
So that was my. That's one I've had forever, and I've had several copies of it because I keep losing them. But yeah, it was. I think it's supposed to be a mythical nighttime drive across America. That's what it's supposed to be loosely based on, and it is. At the time I was getting into music that was kind of, you could label as kind of traveling without moving type stuff. You know, you could sit down and go on a journey with it, and that was one of the best ones for me. There was a lot of similar stuff out at the time, but I think this was probably one of the seminal ones.
Yeah, it's a great record. It's one I haven't listened to for a long, long time, probably since it came out.
Because you need about an hour. You know, you need about an hour.
Yeah. Listen to it. It's a real sit down and listen to it from beginning to end thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
and go ahead.
On you go.
No.
Okay. My third one is a return to a band we spoke about when we were talking in the 80s, and it is Aztec Camera. And it's Dreamland is the name of the album, which came out in 93, but I didn't buy it till 95, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But I have been trying to find these all in my CD collection, but there's a couple of boxes that I never unpacked from when I moved to this flat. So I think this might be there, but just so people know what it looks like, that is the album cover there with Roddy, Aztec Camera. So Dreamland, I bought it when I was in Australia, in Perth, Australia, and it is an album about Roddy's love. It's a romance in and about Barcelona, put it that way. The whole album, it's almost a concept album about his love affair that he's having with someone in Barcelona, based on a real relationship. And it's just beautiful from start to finish. Songs like Birds, Spanish Horses, which, if you've never heard that track, he does the Spanish guitar on it. Ryuki Sakamoto, talking about ambient people, is on the record right through it. You know, and Roddy Frame has had this real brilliant thing of collaborating with great people. You know, on Knife, he collaborates with Martin Knopfler. He collaborated with your man from The Clash, his name escapes me for a minute. And here, Ryuki Sakamoto, and you can hear the influence in the tracks like Clocks and Belle of the Ball. And there's a kind of sad melancholy to it as well, because he kind of knows this period is going to end, and the relationship's going to end. I said before, I don't think anyone writes about love like Roddy Frame does. Funnily enough, today, when we were recording this, is the centenary of Edwin Morgan's birthday. The Scottish poet Edwin Morgan, who himself collaborated later in life with Idlewild and many other musicians. But I think Morgan writes best when he's writing love poetry, or at least about romance and the good and bad. And I think that's what Roddy Frame does. He manages to capture that. And this album is a kind of, well, he called an album Love, didn't he? But this one is a very specific one. And it actually made me, the first time I visited Barcelona, I've been there a few times now, I went because of this record, because I wanted to go to the places that he names and walk the streets and have a coffee in Plaza Real, which he mentions in it, and all of that stuff. And yeah, I just adored that record. And I still do today. All of these ones I still go back to and listen to. But that was Aztec Camera and Dreamland. So we're moving on to number 4, Andy.
Number 4, here's a real curveball.
Okay,
it's an album.
We like a curveball.
You know how last time we talked about Celtic prog?
We did.
Or Gaelic prog.
Yeah, we did. We talked about the Run Rig.
About the Run Rig. Well, there's a band called Iona, and they put out an album called Beyond These Shores in 1993.
I think I've said that at yours. I think I've played that when I've been up visiting you.
Yeah, so I bought it based on the fact I kind of flipped it over and I saw Robert Fripp was playing on it. I've yet to find the bit that he plays on because there's Frippatronics on it somewhere. But it's a concept album based on St. Brendan's voyage, who was one of the monks who sailed from Ireland in a leather and wood boat in the 6th century.
You were at art school at the time you were listening to the...
Yes, we were into all sorts. And so, and as I was looking up, because I wanted to rejig my memory, and it had the horrendous title of Celtic prog Christian rock.
That's a hard sell.
That's quite niche. So, but it's a fabulous record, really well produced record. There's all sorts of atmospherics on it. It goes by the rule. I think it was Warren from the Starry Skies who said, if in doubt, put a rain stick on it. And there's things you turn and it.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So there's some of them on it, but there's some fantastic guitar playing, some fantastic musicianship, and it's a wonderful, beautiful record. And I quite like. The more I've read about Brian, he says he likes a lot of church music, There's something appealing about music that is made by people with a faith because there's a joy in it, and there's even though you might not share that particular point of view.
He obviously didn't go to our Church of Scotland when we were kids if he thinks there's a joy.
There was not much joy. Apart from when I dropped a wee car on somebody's head. But no, it's one of them, I just find it a really uplifting album, and you get that kind of sense of the soaring eagles and the great voyages, and I'd recommend that one. It's a brilliantly produced thing. It sounds crystal clear, and it's got Celtic harp and low whistles and ebos and you name it. It's got kitchen sink on it, but it's a fantastic album.
It's interesting you should mention that, because one of the albums I was going to put in my top 10 or in my 10, which I didn't, was Mike Scott's Bring 'Em All In, which I listened to a lot, particularly again when I was travelling. And it's about faith and his faith. And at the time he was going up to Findhorn, up and it's about staying in Findhorn, about discovering himself, and not really the kind of stuff that I would normally, perhaps, in terms of themes, listen to. But it's a great album, and there's a strength in his own faith which comes out in it, and they're great songs, really brilliant songs.
Apparently he's very fond of the piano in that hall up there.
Yeah.
There's a certain piano, apparently.
Universal Hall, I think is what it's called.
Aye.
So before I talk about this, Travis the Man Who was 1999. It was later.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really? I didn't realise it was that late. Right?
Yeah. Anyway, so Teenage Fan Club, Grand Prix, the album before, Songs from Northern Britain. Yeah. I think those two are my favourite albums. Difficult to pick one of them, but not for me, because this isn't just an album I love. It's an album which means a lot to me. I mentioned before I was in Australia in 95, 96 working, and that's when this came out in 95, late 95. And I just played it all the time. And the songs, it almost makes me greet to think how much that means to me, that record. About You, Sparky's Dream, Verisimilitude, just every single track is brilliant. I think it's them, the best collection of songs they have. I would say Songs from Northern Britain's the next one. I love everything they do, but I think they were really hitting their stride as a band when Grand Prix came out. I know some people like the earlier kind of grungier stuff, bandwagon-esque and all of that, and I love that as well. But yeah, as you were saying, there's something sunny in the music, even when there's kind of melancholy in the lyrics, you know, and kind of sadness in the lyrics. There's still, and it shows all of them as great songwriters. Each one of the member of the band. Yeah, I love Grand Prix by Teenage Fangirl to bits.
I think that's one of my favourite qualities in a lot of songs, that kind of melancholy but uplifting at the same time. It's quite a hard thing to pitch, but you know, when you get a kind of uplifting song which is still kind of melancholy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this, for all that Morrissey might be the man whose name we dare not name, that's what the Smiths did so brilliantly often. You get this wonderful guitar line together with old Morrissey's lyrics. Anyway, let's not. We're not here to talk about him. What's your next one, Andy? We're up to number 5. I make it
number 5. Right. Okay. Okay. There's a record. It's misleading because it's called Dream Journals 1966 to 1976 by Robin Williamson, but it came out in 96, I think. Right. Pretty sure. On CD anyway. And yeah. I don't think it was out. I don't think it was out on record. And what it was Robin Williamson, when he was with the Incredible String Band and touring America and so forth, he was in the habit of writing a morning diary, and this would be later put together as a dream journal.
Right.
And this kind of appealed to me because I've always been keen on keeping journals and making notes, and it's fabulous to look back at these. You know, once you get in the habit of doing it, years later, you think, what on earth was that about?
What were my dreams like? What was I?
Oh, I mean, especially if you were in the California folk scene in '66, I would imagine. But so when he was touring, he got into the habit of doing this, and so he turned these journals into songs from the inner life, and they're fabulous. They're absolutely bonkers, you know, really, really bonkers. Quite hard to follow, but I just love the imagery of them because they are very much like dreams. They don't make sense, you know. There's people fold their wings and then turn around and speak to somebody else, and you know, all that kind of gear. It's really good. It's very bizarre, but I was listening to a lot of Robin Williamson at that time anyway, so a lot of his stuff is quite because it's so Celtic and so bardic and mixed in with storytelling and harp playing. It's kind of borderline Tolkien-esque, you know. Mm-hmm. It's that kind of, and I suppose that's right because Tolkien stuff came out of the Nordic tradition and the bardic tradition. So
Tom Bombadil, all that stuff.
Absolutely, I married Tom Bombadil. So yeah, so that's my number 5. It's worth finding if you can find it.
We should say, for anyone who didn't hear us talking about the 80s, we spoke about Robin Williamson there, and he's an amazing musician and really worth checking out, either with the Incredible String Band or his solo stuff as well.
Yeah.
Okay, my number 5 is Ruby and Saltpeter. Do you know it at all?
No, I don't know at all.
Right, so Leslie Rankin is a Scottish singer, and she in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, was in a band called Silverfish, who were kind of part of the whole kind of Camden scene just before Britpop, you know, took over that part of London and everything. Right. And she famously used to have a T-shirt that said "Hips, Lips, Tits, Power," and the T-shirt actually became more famous than the band. But they were a real kind of hardcore political angle to them, real kind of almost grunge, really, I suppose. A Riot Girl kind of stuff. Anyway, she left them in 93 and in 95 returned as Ruby with an album called Saltpeter. And of course, Britpop was going on at that time, but so was trip hop. And you had, you know, the Bristol scene like Massive Attack and Tricky and the Wild Bunch and, you know, all of that stuff. And that's what the Saltpeter album does is take the kind of politics and anger of Silverfish, the passion, and basically add trip hop beats to it. Add, you know, Wild Bunch sounds and what Tricky was doing at the time, and it really makes for a very interesting album. I noticed when I was looking to do this that there are some clips of her on Jules Holland's show. So it must have been one of the early Jules Holland shows. And they don't really do the album. It doesn't work brilliantly live, I don't think, but the album, the production on it's great. Yeah, Ruby and Saltpeter is definitely one to check out. It's kind of one of the lost trip hop albums, I would suggest, but as good as any of them.
Don't think I've got much trip hop, Ali.
No, never into Massive Attack.
No, I didn't have. I maybe had the one with the big beetle on it. I don't know.
Yeah, Mezzanine. You think you probably did have that, because that had, and more of her later, Liz Fraser did the vocals on Teardrops.
Right, yeah, I got you. Yeah.
So there were hits, but I think I've seen Massive Attack. Massive Attack and Primal Scream are probably the two bands I've seen more live than anyone else. And one of the best gigs I was ever at was Tricky supporting PJ Harvey at the Barras. And so I really did get into that whole kind of music. It's great because it was, again, from the club scene, but you could sit and listen to it at home as well, you know, that they really kind of crossed over. So while you were listening to Robin Williams and I was listening to the trip hop.
Well, I was sitting in a field finding myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, number 6, Andy, let's go.
Okay, The Man Who by Travis.
1999.
Was that? Yeah, it is the same year. And I really liked Good Feeling when it came out as well. Listened to that a lot. And in many ways,
that's my favourite album. I think the first album is my favourite.
I prefer the sound of it, and I like a lot of the B-sides from that period because they're nice and loose and they've got noisy guitars on them, which I like. But I just because The Man Who was so to me it was such a solid piece of work, and also just at that time I think I was my first job I had after art school, and I can remember coming out of the Uddingston low level, coming out into Argyle Street up the escalator and out into the daylight, and Clyde One or whatever had set up a big sort of stand with the speakers and the decks and everything, and it was blaring out. I think it was Driftwood.
It's a great song.
And it was just hit us, like, because people had said, oh, Franny's doing quite well just now, and you're like, oh yeah, that's good, that's nice, and stuff like that, and it just never clicked. And then suddenly the enormity of how well this thing had done, it was like, wow, so, but it's just such a strong memory coming out of that substation and then just going, oh, right, this stuff blaring out into the early morning, and I love the sound on it.
We should say that you knew Franny. You were in a band with him when you were both younger, so that's how you know. And going, oh, Franny's doing quite well. You go, oh, well done. And then suddenly they're plastered on every bus and they're playing it at Tower Records or whatever. Yeah.
No, it was, and I think it was what's his name, Goderich, wasn't it? Goderich?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, Nigel Goderich.
Who was working with Radiohead at the time. Stuff like that. So it was it was a pretty sophisticated sounding album, even though some of the songs are quite straightforward in their structure and stuff like that. It's really amazing sounding album.
Yeah,
which I don't listen to a lot, but when I do, it's really. Excuse me.
A lot of people have given Travis the blame for Coldplay coming along, which I think is very unfair. And I know who I would much rather listen to. But that album is a really good album. Some of the songs, you say they're maybe simple in inverted commas, but the production really works with the songs as well. Driftwood's a great song. Writing to Reach You is
a great song. Yeah. No, I think a fantastic album, that, and I know it divides people, but I think it's a great album.
Okay, so I am going to go with The Bathers and Sunpowder. Now, I could have picked Lagoon Blues, which was their debut that came out in 1993, but the Sunpowder came out, 96, I think, 96. And it is where they really kind of hit their stride. If anyone who doesn't know the Bathers, because they were kind of called, I think, Scotland's best kept secret at one point, they were not just a Glasgow band, they seemed to be a West End of Glasgow band. You know, there's an album called Kelvin Grove Baby. There's lots of references to the walking the West End streets and all that kind of stuff. Production is gorgeous. You know, there's strings and percussion and Chris Thompson's vocals, which are just gorgeous. They're so rich. And there's the harmonies. And this album in particular was one I thought they really hit their stride, and they sounded kind of a bit like no one else at the time. And yes, there was kind of Lloyd Cole and Love and Money, and you know, there were kind of and we'll talk about Craig Armstrong later on. You know, those kind of bands, but they seemed to take it to another level. It was almost orchestral. Well, it was orchestral, I guess. And I still love the Bathers to this day. I listen to them regularly. And this one has the bonus of having guest vocalist Elizabeth Fraser from the Cocteau Twins on it, and particularly on a track called Angel on Ruskin, which is one of my favourite songs of all time. It's beautiful. Check out Angel on Ruskin. It's great because her vocals come in and just lift everything, which is already a great height, and just lift it to another level. Okay, Andy, number 7.
Well, this is another Robin Williamson related thing, because that's what I was listening to a hell of a lot of in the 90s. And it's an album called Wheel of Fortune, which he did with John Renbourn, who played in Pentangle.
Oh.
Right, so he can play his guitar, you know. Yeah. So they met up. I mean, they crossed paths all the time, you know, back in the day when they were touring, etc. And at that point, I think he was living out in San Francisco or something. I think Robin lives in Britain now, but they had decided to do this tour because all they would need was a guitar, small harp, you know, and that's it. Off they go on the road, and they did this tour, which was recorded. It's a live recording, and there's a couple of stories as well. He's a storyteller as well as other things. And one of the jokes is that they didn't know what to call themselves, and Robin's from Incredible String Band, and you know, John's from Pentangle, so they were going to call themselves the Impenetrable String Tangle, which appealed to me at the time. Touché.
But they didn't.
Right. Eh?
But they didn't.
No, they didn't. And so yeah. And there's some brilliant stuff. There's a lot of John Renbourn's stuff that he plays, the English dance, some of his classic stuff, which are guitar pieces, just solo guitar pieces, but he does sing on it as well. And well, it's just a nice record. It reminded me, I listened to it recently just to remind myself of it again, and you know, the kind of nights that we were doing up at the Braemar Gallery, the sort of intimate nights where you'd get people coming in, they'd do a bit of storytelling. I was listening to the Ali Roberts record last night with the what was the French group of singers called?
You had them up, didn't you?
Yeah. It'll come to me, but that was an amazing night, you know, because they just put the table down, got the whiskey out, got the wine out, sat around it, and did a very like they were sitting at the kitchen table at home, and then they sat in the audience and sang as well. Well, this reminded me very much of that kind of thing. It's very informal, but thankfully somebody recorded it all, and I think it's on Pig's Whisker music.
And that, I mean, you know, Ali Roberts' influences is from a lot of that music, you know. He absolutely reveres a lot of that stuff.
Yes, absolutely. He told me he's sat on John Renbourn's knee because he was just a wee boy at the time. Yeah.
27 years old he was.
Yeah, that's right. It was last week. So yeah,
good gag.
Yeah, great gag.
Okay, my number 7 again, unsurprising, I think, but I had to do it. And it is the Blue Nile and Peace at Last. I've just realised these are the CD years, really. You know, because
they are, yeah, format.
I had in vinyl in the 80s, and then into the 90s, suddenly it was, as you can, well, I won't show you, and that over there, big wall of CDs. And yeah, so.
Where did all the cassettes go? The cassettes? I have no cassettes. I don't know. They all just went into a vortex.
Into a landfill somewhere.
I don't know.
Because I had lots of stuff that I used to take for work.
I had loads of cassettes.
Yeah.
I don't know where they are.
Blue Nile, Peace at Last, the third Blue Nile album. Just a mere 7 years after Hats. That one came out in 96. Hats we talked about last time when we did the 80s. And what can you say? It's really just more of the same. You can't get enough Blue Nile, and if only there was more, I would say. It was another 8 years, by the way, until the next one came out, which was High.
I think that's what's quite good about it, though, because you do really, you know, there's a lot of people that just put out record after record after record. It's like, if you've got nothing to say, don't do it. You know, don't put out some
Unfortunately, it's the same with many people. It's the same with painters, perhaps, or definitely with writers. We're talking about Robin Jenkins the other day, who wrote over 30 novels, and it's kind of been forgotten, partly I think because he wrote so many of them, you know. And I think that's the thing with actually you couldn't accuse the Blue Nile of doing that. No. That's for sure.
No, throw enough shit at the wall and it'll stick, but you've still got to walk up.
Well, yeah. But they take their time, and God bless them for it. It's this again. I just love every track on it. I don't think it was as warmly received as the first two, but who cares?
Brilliant album.
Family Life and God Bless You Kid, 2 songs that would make me greet listening to them. I mean,
Ali, they did make you greet. I was there when we saw them live.
Oh, I forgot that. That's right.
We went to see them live, and Ali was like a blubbering. So was I, actually, but you know, it's fun.
It was a very, very, very special evening.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, there's nothing much else to say. Every home should have one when it comes to each Blue Nile album, and Peace at Last, just beautiful, beautiful record.
It is.
Okay, number 8. We're getting there, Andy.
Gosh, we're in number 8 already. I've got Boards of Canada, Music is the Right to Children.
Round of applause for me. I always pick that. What a record that is.
How do you like them apples?
I like them fine.
Good. I bought this on recommendation again because at the time I was, it was before, it was music that came before what is now kind of come to be known as the kind of hauntological records, you know, the hauntology records from Ghost Box Records, Belbury Polly and Advisory Circle and people like that. It was that sort of, it was a nostalgia or a nostalgia for a past that maybe didn't quite happen, you know, or that kind of, do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do. No,
it's a kind of
realized past.
Half not quite remembered nostalgia, and that really appealed to me. It still does, and that most of the music I like these days, a lot of it deals with that from the label Ghost Box, which I can't recommend.
That's kind of what your art does, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of misremembered, because we do anyway. We pick and choose the things that we remember, and we remember our own version of what happened. But this, in a musical sense, was that kind of thing. These kind of warbly, slightly broken sounding analog synthesizers and samples and field recordings, and some almost hip hop inspired kind of feel to it in some places, and it just suited me down to the ground. That kind of woozy, kind of summery sound again, quite dark sounding in places as well. But it really appealed to me. It's not an album I play a lot because at the time when I was playing it a lot, it was very much of its time, and I've found other music which does a similar thing for me, which I listen to a lot more. But this, if that makes any sense, this was one that introduced me to thinking that was a form of music, this kind of misremembered, nostalgia. That's what I like to call it, if that makes any sense.
It does. And what's interesting about Boards of Canada is that I think there was they influenced a lot of people, but at that time there was really nobody doing what they were doing.
No.
That's what it seemed like.
Excuse me. Yeah, no, I wasn't aware of anyone doing it. It sounded unique to me, and it still does. Yeah.
Okay, my number 8, again, it's one which I think is still maybe locked away because I couldn't find it. So I'll bring up the cover here. And it is the Arab Strap with, come on. The Weekend Never Starts Around Here. There's the cover off it, if I can get rid of that.
Okay, yeah.
First Arab Strap album. And to me, hearing this was the equivalent of when I was 16 and I picked up a copy of Bus Conductor Hines by James Kelman, and I picked up The Was Factor Being Banked, very, very close together, and read them and went, oh, wow, there are people like me in books, and there are people that talk our way in books. Similarly, when I heard The Weekend Never Starts Around Here, and First Big Weekend of the Summer in particular, that track, he went, oh, hang on a minute. We knew that people could sing in Scottish accents. You know, Proclaimers had done it. It was beginning to be a bit more popular. But for people to be doing what we were doing, going out, weekends, clubs, pubs, all that kind of stuff, making arseholes of themselves. And then they were putting it on record. You could also make music about that. And that was fantastic. And what a band, Arab Strap, the inspiration from Aidan Moffat and Malcolm Middleton and what they've done solo as well. But it's all in essence in that very first record. And it's a hugely influential record to me, and I think to many other bands that followed. I mean, many, many other bands that followed wouldn't be doing what they're doing without Arab Strap, I would suggest.
Did you say Malcolm Middleton? Did you say? Yeah. I once made the mistake of putting one of his records on while I was painting a scenery for a pantomime that I'd volunteered to do up. I never got down a ladder as quickly as my life. It was like,
brilliant, because the boy can swear. Though they both can. They're both marvellous swearers. But
for anyone knows the album, it's a track called Autumn on Into the Woods, I think it's called.
Yeah, that's it.
First line, if it's right, drops a bomb. So I was like, the children. Yeah,
it's fantastic stuff. I mean, brilliant
music.
And still to this day making amazing music. Okay, number 9, Andy, from yourself.
9 is Space by Space, but Space where Jimmy Cauty and oh gosh, who's the other guy? They were going to be the Orb. It was the first lineup of the Orb, but
Patterson, Alex Patterson.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. Sorry, I've not got that in front of me. Oh no, here we go. Alex Patterson. Yeah, got you. And so they were the original lineup of the Orbs, but there was a dispute about the recording. There was a fallout, so they were going to put it out under the KLF title, but then they put it out as Space. It just said Space on it. It didn't say anything about KLF on it at all.
This is brand new to me.
Right, no, it's worth getting a hold of. I couldn't get it. I got a pal of mine, Gareth Neil. Yeah. Call him Wee Gareth Neil because he used to be Wee. He's not Wee anymore. How appalling to still call somebody Wee. Right, so anywho, he bumped me a copy and it's fabulous. It's good. It's kind of like it's the same idea as the Chill Out album, except it's a journey. It's a journey across the sort of universe, as it was. You empty space between the worlds, and then you pass different planets, and they've got clips of Disney in there, and they've got all sorts of nursery rhymes and synths. You know, they did a lot of. It was a jam, basically. So, you know, they started out doing it, and but after the fallout, they took all the other chap stuff off the recording. So it's just his recording, but it's a fabulous thing. It's hard to describe, but it's just like a big sprawling analog ambient piece with samples and so forth. So it's very similar to Chill Out. But I never see it anywhere. It's called Space.
That's it. Oh, I must check that out. That sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, number 9 for me. I had to include some Belle and Sebastian because they were a big band for me in the later part of the 90s. And I think few bands have had a run like they did from the beginning. So you had Tiger Milk, which was their debut. You know, there's lots of myth and legend about that. At Stowe College, you know, course, and this is where they put it together. Followed it up with If You're Feeling Sinister, and then The Boy with the Arab Strap. But they also had these incredible EPs, Dog and Wheels, 369 Seconds of Light. This is just a modern rock song. And the one I'm picking, that I'm going to feature, is Lazy Line Painter Jane, EP from Belle and Sebastian, I think 1997, I think. Maybe 90, yeah, I think 97. Anyway, it's Belle and Sebastian. What more do you need to know? You kind of know what they do.
Exactly.
It's particularly special because it's got the guest vocals of Monica Queen on it.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, Monica, who was in Thrum and is currently in Tenement and Temple and had her amazing solo albums. And if we do one about the noughties, Andy, then I'm sure Monica will make an appearance there. But this was
I had to look that up, and it didn't come under 90s, the one that I wanted to put on.
Right.
It comes much later on, so that would have been...
So yeah, Lazy Line Painter Jane, I think it's one of the best Belle and Sebastian tracks. But that period, it was almost like not many bands have a run. I think the Smiths' first few albums and singles, Prince for a while, Prefab Sprout for a while, had a run of records that each one, they were just doing it, you know, hitting that mark every single time. And Belle and Sebastian on to make other great records. But for a while, in terms of nobody could touch them, I think they were just superb. And they're not everyone's cup of tea, but yeah, I'm a big fan of Belle and Sebastian, and particularly what they did in the late 90s. Okay, Andy, it's time for our final choice. And before you tell us what that is, we should fess up. Keen-eyed viewers will notice that you have had a costume change since we talked about our number 9s. But Zoom let us down, and we weren't able to talk about our final choices. So let's not pretend that that's not the case. But
much time has passed.
Much time has passed, yeah.
It is now the next day.
And I look incredibly similar, but you've at least had a change of clothing, which was a wise thing to do.
Wash as well.
I've not moved. I've been here all night.
Try to get a connection on the Zoom.
Exactly. Okay, yeah, number 10, Andy, our last choice of our 90s records.
Number 10 for me is Screamadelica by Primal Scream, for which that I am a huge fan anyway, but this was a real curveball when it came out to me, because I did, unlike you, Ali, I wasn't going to nightclubs, etc. I was just a tiny bit younger.
You weren't aware of the kind of big influence of...
And let's face it, music. Considerably more square, so I wasn't going out to clubs and stuff.
See, I found the single version of Loaded, which has got the original I'm Losing More Than I'll Ever Have, which is what Loaded was sampled from, and really the start of the whole Screamadelica thing, isn't it?
That was apparently Andy Weatherall really liked the ballads, the slow ballads, funnily enough, on the Primal Scream second album. And he really liked the ballads. He was really a big fan of the record. So and that one was the only one that they'd recorded with a click track, so he could chop it and edit it into something else. And that's, like you say, that's where it all started. But for me, the ones that really appealed, because I was into Brian Eno and kind of ethereal sounding records. So things like Shine Like the Stars and Higher Than the Sun, dub symphony in 2 parts, and Damaged, Coming Down, Inner Flight. those appealed to me absolutely instantly, first listening, you know. But some of the more kind of dancey stuff took me a while to get rid of. But now it's just one of my favourite records. I mean, it really is. Who'd have thought that, you know, it's a classic. It's a classic, you know.
It's a game-changing record. It really did. I mean, you know, you talk about going to clubs, and that, you know, spent a lot of time in dance clubs, but also a lot of time in indie clubs. And here was where the two met perfectly. Mm-hmm. And you also had, I mean, I think even the Soup Dragons might have done it before, but it didn't make such a big impact. But there were other bands who were doing something similar. You mentioned Jesus Jones, I think, when we chatted earlier on.
EMF.
Yeah, well, I mean, it made, you know, it brought kind of club music. It gave it a live dimension, which it didn't have before. You know, if you think about when the early dance records were on Top of the Pops, and it was like a fake singer up front and maybe two guys on decks playing and all this. I mean, suddenly here were bands that were playing it live. Although you could say this is more of an Andy Weatherall record than Primal Scream, or
yes.
Sacrilege?
I don't know. I don't know how much is. It certainly would seem that he had a huge fingerprint on it. But I saw the tour. I saw them live when they were touring this, and it was one of the loudest things I've ever seen, and incredible. But yeah, it didn't. Although they had the guitarists and they had Throb and Bobby up front and all the rest of it, it sounded absolutely enormous. You know, it was really a huge sounding record live. You know, so it was great. Good times.
Because that's what those the dance records that Andy Weatherall had been doing, the Sabres of Paradise and things like that. A lot of them, it was a huge bass sound. That was kind of part of it. You know, you weren't. Your whole body was kind of shaken by the sound that was coming out of it. And actually, what's interesting is Primal Scream before that, they had moved from a kind of very indie jangle pop to a kind of heavier sound on like an MC5 sound. But this would have been a bigger thing than ever before.
And it would make your Joe Blogg's denims flap in the bass. With the bass. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's me. That's Screamadelica. Yeah.
Well, I am going to give you my 10. I've only just decided which one of these is going to be my 10. So I'm going to give a very honourable mention for Superstars, 18 Carat, Joe McAlinden, who'd been in the Boy Hairdressers with many, you know, Douglas from BMX Bandits and Teenage Fan Club, stuff like that. But this is a great record. I played it to death, and Joe McAlinden's just got such a great voice. But I'm going with Craig Armstrong and The Space Between Us, which was the first Craig. I was aware of Craig Armstrong. He played with the Big Dish, as many musicians who have gone on to other things did. But I wasn't that aware of his stuff, and it was a friend of mine at the time. The way I do with Hats and the Blue Nile kind of forced it upon me and said, "You're going to love this record." And so she gave me a copy of it, and I absolutely did. It's superb. It's got, again, Elizabeth Fraser guest vocals on it. Paul Buchanan is on it. There's tracks that would end up being in Romeo and Juliet and used on film soundtracks, and that's really where Craig Armstrong went. You know, he did Moulin Rouge, he did some of Romeo and Juliet, he would do other things, big orchestral sounds, but he also does, I've got all of his stuff. I'm a huge fan of Craig Armstrong. He's got his Piano Works albums, which is just the kind of piano versions of a lot of his stuff. It's that what you were talking about earlier on about the soundscapes and the ethereal stuff. That's what he was getting to. It's still quite a kind of pop album in a way, but with a big sound to it. Yeah, and interesting going into the noughties that this would kind of define a lot of what he did for sure. So that is our 10 best Scottish albums, are the ones that we treasure the most of the 90s. And what's interesting is, because as I said at the very beginning of this, we went from living in the same house and then kind of going to different parts of the country and finding, doing different things, is that you, partly because you were doing your stuff at art school, but also I think part of the world you were into kind of the Eno and the Harold Budd and all the kind of soundscape stuff what you were incorporating into your art. also a lot of the folk stuff, I think, that was probably more prevalent up there.
And also, that's who's, you know, mixing with, like I say, the guys at the printmakers, at Peacock printmakers and things like that. It's the people that you meet, you know, that they say, oh, here's a wee cassette or whatever, you know, and it was still had cassettes, of course.
Whereas I was very much kind of ensconced in the kind of Glasgow scene of bands that were not just playing in Glasgow, but that were, you know, you met in pubs and bars and clubs and all that kind of stuff. So it's quite interesting to see how our tastes developed. Well, thanks, Andy, for doing this again.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Sorry we cut out in the middle, but
yeah, it's all right. We got there in the end, and it'll be interesting if we do another one of these, which would be the noughties, to see just how much it kind of diverses even further. It'll be that will be quite interesting. But for now, I'm going to say cheerio to you.
Cheers, Ali.
Yep. See you soon. And we'll be back soon with the Scots Whay podcast with someone completely different, and then maybe someone very similar after that.